Hello guys, I hope you all are well. Today we are looking into Pilavin. Pilavin is the second study in the social approach part of AS psychology syllabus. It looks into the pro-social behavior that we call helping. Good Samaritanism refers to helping behavior, especially helping strangers. It looks at situational variables. This is a very famous study as it was a field experiment which tested these situational variables and tested the psychology being investigated, which we will talk about later in the video. They tested it in a real life setting, which was the subway train. It's normally known as the subway train study. So let's get into it. A little background to the study. Previous research has shown that diffusion of responsibility exists. What exactly is diffusion of responsibility? Our decision as to whether we want to help a person depends on whether we see it as our personal responsibility to do so. Right? As you can see in this picture, the person is telling another person, I thought you would do it. Right? So, for example, I'm in a room and I see someone collapsing, but at the same time there are 10 other people in the room with me. So those 10 people will see it as that they have the 10% responsibility to help the person who is collapsing. However, if I'm the only one available in the room and I see someone collapsing, I would feel that it's my 100% responsibility to help the person. Right? So here's a picture of a girl named Kitty Genovese who was attacked in an open area. She cried for help. She called for help, but at the same time, the people who were there, it was believed that a dozen people were around her, but they heard her cries for help, but no one came to help her because they believed that okay, there are other people around me, so someone or another will help her and she'll get away with it. But actually, no one came to help her and she died because her attacker came back and killed her. So, this is a really famous example that they give along with it. So, let's look into the previous laboratory experiments that have tested this, the phenomenon which is being tested in this study, which is helping behavior. Right? So Darley Latine saw that people were more likely to help when they believed they were alone. Now there is a difference between this study and the study which we are studying right now, is that this was a laboratory experiment and the study with the Pilavin is a field experiment, which means that the people in this study only heard the victim over an earphone. They heard him or her having a seizure, right? And they believe okay, there are other person there, or so someone will help the person, which is why they found out that people were more likely to help when they believed they were alone. But in this study, as it is a field experiment, we want to retest this and we want to see if the people, when they can actually hear and see the victim, would this occur again or not? Would diffusion responsibility would be seen again or not? There was another experiment by Bryan and Test found that people were more likely to help if they observed another person being good Samaritan. This is pretty self-explanatory as we are much more likely to help people when we see someone who we look up to or if we see someone helping someone, right? It may be to help the person who's helping, it may be to receive the same praise that a person who is helping is receiving, right? We all want that kind of a reward, which is praise. So we are much more likely to help a person if we see someone helping first. Okay, so let's get into the psychology being investigated. The psychology being investigated is what we talked about, diffusion of responsibility. We want to retest it. They found this phenomenon in the previous laboratory experiment, but now we want to see if in a real life setting would diffusion of responsibility would actually occur or not, because in this study the victim would be both seen and heard as well. All right. So, what are the aims of the study? The broader aim of the study is to test diffusion of responsibility in a natural real life setting, which is a subway train, as you can see here, and other four situational variables. Our primary situational variables are type of the victim and the race of the victim. So let's talk about the type of the victim, ill or drunk. So the type of the victim was operationalized through an ill or a drunk victim. All right. So they developed this hypothesis that people will be much more likely to help an ill victim rather than a drunk victim. Why is that? They gave two reasons for it. Firstly, people are much more likely to derogate the character of the drunk victim. They may say, okay, they are responsible for their condition. It's their plight. They got drunk themselves. They're responsible for their position. So it might not be our responsibility to help the person because he or she did this to themselves, right? However, we do not see the same um, we do not realize the same reason with the ill person because it's not his or hers um, responsibility that they are ill, right? Or that they're collapsing. Okay, so you might see in this picture here, he'll be okay. I guess he's drunk, right? So the person over here is saying, I guess he's drunk. So he's thinking that, okay, it's not my responsibility to help the person because he got drunk himself. We don't need to help him anymore, right? So let's talk about the race of the victim. How was this operationalized? We presented to our participants a black victim and a white victim to see if same race helping is likely to occur. Like based on the previous research, based on similarity and liking, people also saw that you are much more likely to help a person of your same race, such as a black person is much more likely to help a black person, a white person is much more likely to help a white person, right? So they wanted to test this phenomenon in this study as well. Okay, so behavior of a model. As we talked about earlier, people are much more likely to help when they see someone helping first, right? So this was operationalized through an early model condition and a late model condition, which we will be talking about in detail later in the videos. But this was one of the situational variables because we believe that a person is much more likely to help. We are much more likely to elicit helping from people around us if we help first. Okay, so the size of the group. This is the actual independent variable which is testing diffusion of responsibility. We want to see if the difference in the size of the group, the difference in the number of the people in the train, would that make a difference in the helping behavior of the participants, right? In the frequency and the latency of the helping. What do I mean by the frequency of the helping? Frequency refers to the number of people who have helped, and the latency refers to the delay in helping, the number of seconds that people took in helping the person. So that's what we are testing in here as well. We are testing it here because over here people can actually see whether the person has been already helped or not, because in previous laboratory experiments people could not actually know that, okay, whether the person who is in need, whether the victim has already received the help or not, because they could only hear the victim. But here, as they can actually see the situation, as they can actually see um, the person collapsing and the people around the person, they can understand and they can know that whether the person has received help or not, and subsequently whether we should help or not, right? And we are also looking into visual cues because last in the last laboratory experiments there were no visual cues, they could only hear the victim, but now the victim is both seen and heard. So which is why now we are going to test all of our aims in a real life setting, which is the subway train. Okay, so let's get into the setting of the study. This study was a field experiment. It was the trials were conducted between a 7.5 express run between 59th and 125th streets of the 8th Avenue Independent branch of New York subways, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on weekdays, April 15 to June 26. These details are obviously supposed to be remembered as it is tested in the CIA exams. Um, I don't think I need to elaborate on it anymore. But this image over here is fairly important. Okay, so what is the critical area and the adjacent area? Let's talk about that. Critical area is the area near where the victim collapses in the middle of the train. In the middle of the train. Okay, so this train also these trains were chosen because the A and D trains were chosen because they had like two seating arrangements rather than extended seats, so that the victim has the space to collapse, right? So the critical area, people in the critical area would be somewhere around here. They would be really near to the victim who's collapsing. This person is considered to be our victim, right? And our adjacent area is called the adjacent area because it is adjacent to the critical area. All right, so I hope that's clear. The participants were around 4,450 people who boarded the subway train during the course of these periods. Racial composition of the train was 45% black and 35% white. So you can understand that there was not much difference in the racial composition of the train. It's pretty balanced. There is some difference, but not significant. Number of average people in the critical area was 43, and the number of average people in the adjacent area was 9. Now we will get into the procedure in the following video.